Right. So, welcome to the DevOps series, especially in context to Azure DevOps learning. In the previous session, we discussed about how to create a data pipeline. So, for that, to create a data pipeline, first we have created Bitbucket. So, Bitbucket is a code repository which we have to connect with the Bitbucket or GitHub or something of that sort. So whenever we have created this with Bitbucket, it is always essentially important for us to create multiple pipelines, whatever are required and all. So if you want to create a pipeline, you need to have a data source code is important. So to manage the source code, either we can access this source code from even Bitbucket or GitHub. Right? So we have multiple repositories. So that is what something was discussed in the previous session. Now for the project, whatever was taken, especially in context to that, here one more option wherein we need to work on about the environment, because this is what generally the environment stands for, right? So when we want to manage any kind of deployments or something of that sort, creating our own infrastructure using Bitbucket, or it was already there, so that we have to be taken. That is point number one. At the same time, if you want to manage any kind of deployments and all, we have an option where we can create our own environment. Now, if we want to create our own environment for deploying an application or to build and test and deploy the pipelines and all, we have to create our own infrastructure. Here you can see there is an option called using your own infrastructure. Because if you want to manage the environment, right? So if you want to manage your environment or something of that sort, wherein we need to have a different environment, right? So for that, it is always important for us to create our own infrastructure, which is a separate. So if you want to create our environment to create an infrastructure, so here we need to provide an environment name, right? So environment name called as software support. Okay, I'm just giving an example, right? So software support is what something which the description we have to write. So here required to support the application deploy once the development completes. Okay, right? So that's what something I just get written, right? So if you want to create any kind of resource and all, right? So if you want to manage any kind of virtual machines and all, we can manage, point number one. Or else we can add the resources and all everything later. So that is option. At the same time, if you want to create any kind of Kubernetes namespaces and all everything can also be done. Because the kind of Kubernetes concept, let me explain you about this. So when you talk about the Kubernetes concept, Kubernetes is a concept where if you want to deploy multiple applications in the single in a application in any organization, you require different systems, different infrastructures. Instead of it, what we can do, we can create a Kubernetes platform so that whatever the multiple applications we have on a single system using multiple virtual machines, these applications can be deployed so that the infrastructure cost investment in terms of the maintenance cost will be reduced to the people. So now if you want to create any kind of Kubernetes workspace where we can create a Kubernetes workspace over here, right? So for example, Azure Kubernetes service is what something which we have to be taken. So if you want to have any kind of subscriptions to be taken to this existing stuff, we can take it. Otherwise, no. Okay. At the same time, if you want to manage any kind of virtual machines, we can do it. At the same time, I can add the resources later is what something, right? So if you want to add any kind of resources and all, we can add it. This is where generally the software support comes into picture. Now, if you want to add any kind of resources here, we can always see where we have an option for editing of security, because once we have added any kind of resources in the existing application, if you want to manage any kind of securities or if you want to create any authentications and authorizations, etc., everything can be done in this regard. This is where generally the security and all everything are being used for. Or else if you want to add any kind of resources to the existing application you want to do, to perform the deployments, or else if you want to add any kind of approvals and checks and all, everything can be done. So here we can see there is an option for add resources, right? So when it comes to the add resources, here we can see these resources can be accessed either from the Kubernetes platform by creating multiple spaces, namespaces and all, everything can be created. Or else even virtual mission. Virtual mission means you don't require multiple missions to deploy the applications, because let's say an organization, as some time back, as I told you, for example, an organization have 3 to 4 applications. So these 3 to 4 applications to deploy, you require 4 different systems, 4 infrastructures as separate. So the infrastructure cost as well as the time which will be taken to perform all these will be more larger. So in spite of it, what we can do, we have an option where we can create virtual machines. So that in the single system itself, you can create multiple virtual systems, virtual machines, so that whatever the deployment you want to do for that existing application can be done on the single system. So infrastructure cost will come down. At the same time, infrastructure maintenance cost will also be come down for any organization. Because whenever organization move on to the next level, right, when they are expanding their businesses, as far as the business services are concerned, they have to use multiple applications. So when they are using multiple applications and all, they must make sure operational cost and operational difficulty should not be more. In this regard, virtual machine concept, either we can manage our own virtual machines or we can create a workspace in Kubernetes and we can use it. So this is how generally this adding of resources and all, everything is what something which we have to be performed whenever we are working on the environments, being into the operation side or the development side. If you want to do it, this is what generally is what something which we have to be performed in this regard. This is what something which being into the development side to create an environments and all, everything are being used in this regard. This is all about this video and how these resources can be added, at the same time how these deployment groups can be created, followed by the releases and all, everything that we are going to discuss in the next session, right? So if you have any questions, please go ahead.